A new beginning. Dr. Ethan Carter stepped onto the porch of his new home with a mix of excitement and trepidation. The house was modest but charming, a white picket fence framing a yard big enough for Angela's 5 kids to run around. Ethan had chosen Meadowville for its beauty and its need. This small town hadn't had a doctor in years. But as he stood there, his wife Angela at his side, he couldn't ignore the weight of the decision they had made. Angela squeezed his arm, her smile unwavering despite the challenges they had already faced. "You're thinking too much," she teased, her voice light but knowing. "Maybe I am," Ethan admitted, looking out over the quiet street. "I just want them to see us for who we are. Not, whatever they think we represent." Angela, always the pillar of strength, turned to him with a calm determination. "They will. But until then, we'll show them. One act of kindness at a time." Their children, ranging from 3 to 12, dashed across the yard. Little Isaiah tripped over his own feet, falling face-first into the grass. Before Ethan could move, Angela's oldest daughter, Chloe, was there, helping him up and brushing off his pants. The sight made Ethan smile. "See?" Angela said softly. "We've already got the perfect example of what a family should be." But Ethan knew the world wasn't always so forgiving. Meadowville wasn't just a small town, it was a town steeped in tradition, where change was met with suspicion. Their interracial marriage and Angela's blended family stood out like a beacon in this tightly knit, predominantly white community. The next morning, Ethan woke early, his alarm pulling him from restless sleep. He kissed Angela gently on the forehead before getting ready for the day. His first order of business was walking the kids to school, a simple gesture, but one he hoped would show the townspeople that they were just another family trying to find their place. The walk was quiet at first, the crunch of gravel under their shoes the only sound. As they neared the school, the air seemed to shift. Parents clustered near the gate, their conversations stopping as Ethan approached. Eyes followed him, some curious, others cold. "Morning," Ethan greeted them with a polite nod, his voice steady even as his stomach tightened. The silence stretched for a moment before one of the parents, a wiry man in a trucker hat, muttered, "Morning," without making eye contact. Ethan knelt to address the kids before sending them inside. "All right, remember what we talked about, be kind, work hard, and always do your best. Got it?" "Got it," they chorused, though Sarah, the youngest, lingered close to him. Her small hand clung to his as she whispered, "What if they're mean to us, Daddy?" Ethan's heart ached at her question. He crouched down to her level, looking into her wide, worried eyes. "If they are, we show them what we're made of. Kindness and strength, no matter what. And if it gets too hard, you come find me or your mom. Deal?" Sarah nodded, her grip loosening as she turned to follow her siblings inside. Ethan watched until the doors closed behind them, then straightened, feeling the weight of the parents' stares still on him. As he walked back toward home, Ethan couldn't help but reflect on how different things had been before he met Angela. He'd been a rising star in his medical field, respected and sought after by big city hospitals. But something had always been missing, a sense of purpose that went beyond professional accolades. Meeting Angela had changed everything. She was vibrant, intelligent, and unapologetically herself. She had been raising her 5 children alone after her first husband passed, working 2 jobs and still finding time to volunteer at her church. Ethan admired her strength and resilience, and before he knew it, he'd fallen for her completely. Their love hadn't come without challenges, though. Friends and colleagues had questioned his choices. Some had outright criticized him for complicating his life by marrying a black woman with children. Now, standing in a town where those same prejudices seemed to linger, Ethan wondered if he had underestimated the uphill battle they faced. Back at home, Angela was waiting for him with a cup of coffee and a knowing look. "You survived," she teased gently, handing him the mug. "Barely," he replied, sinking into a chair. The parents at the school, they're not exactly rolling out the welcome wagon. Angela sat across from him, her hands wrapped around her own mug. It'll take time. People fear what they don't understand. But we're not here to fight them, we're here to show them who we are. And if that doesn't work, she smiled slyly. Well, I'm not above bringing them a casserole or two. Ethan laughed despite himself, the sound easing some of the tension in his chest. Angela had a way of making even the heaviest burdens feel lighter. The rest of the day passed in a blur as Ethan settled into his clinic, unpacking supplies and organizing the space. A few patients trickled in, mostly older residents with minor ailments. They were polite but guarded, their conversations short and to the point. By the time Ethan closed up for the evening, he felt a mix of exhaustion and accomplishment. He hadn't won anyone over yet, but he'd planted a seed, a small step toward building trust. That night, as he sat with Angela on the porch, the stars overhead casting a soft glow, he found himself feeling hopeful. The road ahead would be long, but he knew they were on it together. Do you think we'll ever fit in here? Angela asked, her voice quiet but curious. Ethan reached for her hand, lacing his fingers with hers. I don't know if we'll ever fit in, but I know we'll make this place home. For us, for the kids. And maybe, just maybe, for them too. Angela leaned her head on his shoulder, and for a moment, all the worries of the day faded into the background. They were a family. They were strong. And they were ready for whatever came next. First impressions. Ethan wiped his hands on a towel and surveyed his newly organized clinic. The hardwood floors gleamed, and the shelves were stocked with supplies he had painstakingly sourced from medical distributors who thought Meadowville was too small to bother with. The scent of antiseptic mingled with the fresh paint on the walls. It wasn't the high-tech hospital he'd worked in back in the city, but it was exactly what the town needed, a place of healing. Angela had spent the morning helping him set up, labeling drawers and arranging patient files. Now she stood at the front desk, her brow furrowed as she reviewed the schedule. Not exactly a full house, she observed with a wry smile. Ethan joined her, glancing at the nearly empty appointment book. 2 patients this morning and 1 follow-up this afternoon. Angela placed a hand on his arm. It's only the first week. People need time to trust you. Ethan sighed. Trust isn't easy to earn when you're already starting at a deficit. Angela tilted her head, her expression thoughtful. Maybe it's not just about earning trust. Maybe it's about showing them they need us. Before he could respond, the door creaked open, and a middle-aged woman with a stern expression entered. She was bundled in a thick wool coat, her lips pressed into a thin line. Ethan recognized her from the school gate, the same woman who had shot him a disapproving glance that morning. Morning, Ethan greeted warmly, stepping forward. How can I help you? The woman hesitated, her gaze flicking to Angela before returning to Ethan. My husband hurt his back lifting hay bales. He's stubborn as a mule and won't come in, but he's in a bad way. I can make a house call, Ethan offered without hesitation. The woman's eyes widened slightly, as though surprised by his willingness. You'd do that? Of course, Ethan said. Let me grab my bag. Angela gave him an encouraging nod as he prepared to leave. Good luck, she whispered. The woman, who introduced herself as Mrs. Whitaker, led Ethan to a modest farmhouse on the outskirts of town. Inside, her husband sat grimacing in a worn armchair, his face flushed with pain. Harold, this is Dr. Carter, Mrs. Whitaker announced. He's here to help. Harold's expression hardened. We don't need no fancy city doctor pokin' around. Ethan crouched beside the chair, meeting Harold's stubborn gaze head-on. I'm not here to poke around. I'm here to help you get back on your feet. Harold grumbled but didn't protest as Ethan conducted a thorough examination. You've strained your lumbar muscles, Ethan explained. I'll give you a mild muscle relaxant and show you some stretches to speed up your recovery. But you need to rest. No lifting for at least a week. Mrs. Whittaker hovered nearby, her concern evident. Will he be all right? With proper care, yes, Ethan assured her. As he packed up his bag, Harold cleared his throat. Thanks, document. Guess you're not as useless as I thought. Ethan smiled. High praise. I'll take it. On the ride back to the clinic, Mrs. Whittaker softened. I wasn't sure about you at first, she admitted. But Harold's a good judge of character, and if he says you're all right, that's good enough for me. It means a lot, Ethan said sincerely. When he returned to the clinic, Angela was waiting with a triumphant grin. House call on day 2. Look at you, already making waves. Let's hope they're the good kind, Ethan said, though he couldn't help but feel a spark of hope. Later that week. Despite Ethan's early success with the Whittakers, most of the town remained distant. Patients trickled in reluctantly, their conversations polite but guarded. Angela faced similar challenges. At the grocery store, conversation stopped when she entered. Parents at the park subtly steered their children away from hers. But Angela was not one to be deterred. She volunteered at the school, helping organize reading sessions and bake sales. Her warm smile and genuine nature slowly began to chip away at the icy barriers. One afternoon, as she walked home with Chloe and Isaiah, a little girl from Chloe's class ran up to them. Hi, Chloe, she chirped, her pigtails bouncing. Hi, Lily, Chloe replied, surprised but pleased. Lily's mother approached more cautiously, her expression hesitant. Angela, right? That's me, Angela said warmly. I'm Mary, the woman said. Lily's been talking about Chloe non-stop. Maybe we could arrange a playdate sometime? I'd love that, Angela said genuinely. As they parted ways, Chloe beamed up at her mother. See, Mom? Not everyone here is mean. Angela ruffled her daughter's hair. Nope. And sometimes, all it takes is one person to change things. Ethan's turning point. That evening, Ethan was preparing to close up the clinic when the door burst open. A burly man with a panicked expression rushed in, carrying a young boy in his arms. Help! He fell out of the tree, and I think his arm's broken. Bring him back here, Ethan instructed, leading them to an exam room. The boy, pale and whimpering, clutched his arm. Ethan worked quickly, assessing the injury. It's a clean break, he assured the father. I'll set it and put it in a cast. The father, whom Ethan recognized as one of the more vocal critics at the school, watched anxiously. You sure you know what you're doing? I've set plenty of bones, Ethan said calmly. Your son's going to be just fine. Once the cast was in place, the boy's tears subsided. Thanks, Doc, the father said gruffly. I was wrong about you. You're the real deal. Ethan met his gaze. I'm just doing my job. As the man left with his son, Ethan felt a sense of accomplishment. Trust was being built, slowly but surely. When he returned home that night, Angela was waiting with a plate of warm cookies. How was your day? She asked. Better than expected, Ethan admitted, taking a bite. I think we're starting to make progress. Angela smiled. Told you. One act of kindness at a time. Ethan wrapped an arm around her, gratitude filling his chest. They had a long way to go, but they were on the right path. And together, there was nothing they couldn't overcome. The storm of judgment. Ethan Carter's name was finally starting to circulate around Meadowville, not just as the new doctor in town, but as someone dependable, compassionate, and skilled. The once empty clinic appointment book now had steady entries, and a few regular patients even stopped by just to chat. Angela's efforts weren't going unnoticed either. Her warm demeanor and genuine love for her children endeared her to the few townsfolk who had opened their hearts. The playdate with Lily had blossomed into a small circle of neighborhood kids who now played regularly with Chloe, Isaiah, and the others. Still, there was an undercurrent of tension, a sense that not everyone was ready to accept the Carter family as part of their community. One evening, after the kids had been tucked into bed, Ethan and Angela sat on the porch, enjoying the cool night air. Fireflies danced across the yard, their golden lights flickering like tiny beacons of hope. "Think we're winning them over?" Ethan asked, taking a sip of his tea. Angela leaned back, her gaze thoughtful. "Some of them, sure. But others? They're holding on to their prejudices like a lifeline." Ethan sighed. "I can't understand that kind of mindset. Why does it matter what we look like or where we come from?" "Fear," Angela said simply. "Fear of change, fear of difference. But you can't fight ignorance with anger, Ethan. You fight it with love and patience." Before he could respond, their conversation was interrupted by the distant rumble of thunder. Dark clouds gathered on the horizon, a storm rolling in fast. "I'll secure the porch furniture," Ethan said, standing up. As the first drops of rain began to fall, Angela called out, "Don't be a hero, Doctor. Get inside before you get soaked. The storm brings trouble." By morning, the storm had passed, leaving behind flooded roads and downed tree branches. Ethan and Angela worked together to clear their yard, the kids pitching in with enthusiasm. They were just finishing up when a battered pickup truck skidded to a stop in front of their house. The driver, a burly man named Sheriff Tate, stepped out, his face grim. "Dr. Carter," he called. Ethan wiped his hands on his jeans and approached. "What's going on, Sheriff?" "We've got a situation at the old community hall. Roof collapsed during the storm, and we've got a few people trapped inside." Angela's eyes widened. "Is anyone hurt?" "Not sure yet," the sheriff admitted. "But we could use your help, document." Ethan didn't hesitate. "I'll grab my bag." Angela stopped him before he could leave. "Be careful," she urged. "I always am," he promised, pressing a quick kiss to her forehead. A desperate rescue. The scene at the community hall was chaotic. Volunteers were working frantically to clear debris, and anxious family members gathered nearby, their faces etched with worry. Ethan assessed the situation quickly. "Who's still inside?" "3 people, Sheriff Tate said. 2 adults and a kid." "Let me through," Ethan insisted, ducking under the caution tape. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the smell of wet wood. Beams lay scattered across the floor, and shards of glass glittered in the dim light. Ethan spotted the trapped individuals, a woman clutching a young boy and an older man pinned beneath a heavy beam. "Hang in there," Ethan said as he approached. "We're going to get you out." He worked quickly, checking the older man's vitals. "You've got a fractured leg, but we'll stabilize it before moving you," he assured him. The woman's eyes filled with tears. "Please save my father," she begged. "I will," Ethan promised. With the help of the rescue team, they managed to lift the beam and carefully move the injured man onto a stretcher. Ethan directed the volunteers on how to stabilize his leg and monitor his condition during transport. As they exited the building, a wave of relief swept through the crowd. The woman clung to her son, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she whispered to Ethan. "I'm just doing my job," he said gently. Sheriff Tate clapped him on the back. "You're a hero today, document." Ethan shook his head. "Just glad everyone's safe." A ripple effect. Word of Ethan's bravery spread quickly. The once cold stares from townsfolk began to soften, replaced by nods of acknowledgement and even smiles. Patients who had been hesitant to visit the clinic now walked through the doors with newfound trust. Angela noticed the shift too. At the grocery store, Mary waved her over. I heard what Ethan did, she said. He's a good man. I think so too, Angela said with a smile. Back at home, Ethan was reviewing patient files when Angela walked in, her eyes shining. You're officially Meadowville's favorite doctor, she teased. Let's not get carried away, he said with a laugh. But the joy was short-lived. That evening, a group of men gathered at the edge of their property. Ethan watched from the porch as they muttered among themselves, their expressions dark. Angela joined him, her brow furrowing. What's going on? I'm not sure, Ethan said, his jaw tightening. One of the men stepped forward. Carter, he called, his voice cold. We need to talk. Ethan squared his shoulders and walked toward them. What can I do for you? The man sneered. You might have fooled some people with your hero act, but we're not buying it. You don't belong here. Neither does your wife or her kids. Ethan's heart pounded, but he kept his voice steady. I'm here to help this town. That's all. Well, consider this a warning, the man said. Not everyone wants your help. As the men walked away, Angela reached for Ethan's hand. Are you okay? I'm fine, he said, though his voice was tight. Angela's eyes blazed with determination. We knew it wouldn't be easy. But we're not going anywhere. Ethan nodded, drawing strength from her resolve. No, we're not. Despite the lingering hostility, Ethan knew one thing for certain, they were making a difference. And no amount of ignorance or hatred would drive them away from the life they were building together. The unyielding stand. The morning after the unsettling encounter with the group of men, Ethan woke up early, his mind restless. The sun hadn't yet risen, casting the sky in muted shades of gray. Angela stirred beside him, her hand instinctively reaching for his. You okay? She murmured sleepily. Couldn't sleep, he admitted, brushing a stray curl from her face. Thinking about last night. Angela sat up, her gaze steady. They're just cowards trying to intimidate us. Don't give them that power. Ethan nodded, though the knot in his chest remained. I just want the kids to be safe. They will be, Angela promised. Because we'll make sure of it. A growing divide. At the clinic, Ethan tried to focus on his patients, but the tension in town was palpable. The rescue at the community hall had earned him the respect of many, but it had also intensified resentment from a vocal minority who clung to their prejudices. Sheriff Tate stopped by around noon, his expression grim. Heard about the trouble at your place last night, he said. Word travels fast, Ethan replied, closing a patient file. Small town, Tate said with a shrug. Look, most folks here appreciate what you're doing. But there's a handful who don't like change, and they're getting restless. Ethan's jaw clenched. Are they dangerous? Tate hesitated. Not yet. But I'd keep an eye out. Thanks for the heads up, Ethan said. As the sheriff left, Angela walked in, carrying a bag of groceries. Everything okay? She asked, noting the tension in Ethan's posture. Just more warnings, he said. Angela set the bag down and crossed her arms. You know what we need to do. What's that? Double down. Keep showing them who we are and why we're here. Ethan smiled despite himself. You always know how to rally me. It's a gift, she said with a wink. The school incident. Later that week, Angela received a call from the school principal. Mrs. Carter, there's been an incident with Chloe, Principal Harris said, her tone serious. Angela's heart raced. Is she okay? She's not hurt, but I think you should come in. Angela arrived at the school within minutes, finding Chloe in the principal's office, her eyes red from crying. What happened? Angela asked, wrapping her arms around her daughter. Chloe sniffled. Some kid said I don't belong here because daddy's white and you're black. They said mean things about our family. Angela's heart ached, but she kept her voice calm. And what did you do? I told them they were wrong, Chloe said fiercely. I told them our family is love, and that's what matters. Pride swelled in Angela's chest. You did the right thing, sweetie. Principal Harris cleared her throat. We take incidents like this seriously, Mrs. Carter. The students involved will face consequences. Thank you, Angela said, though she knew this was just one battle in a larger war. A community divided. That evening, Ethan and Angela gathered the kids for a family meeting. The children sat cross-legged on the living room floor, their expressions solemn. We need to talk about what's been happening, Angela began gently. You've probably noticed that not everyone in town is friendly to us. Isaiah frowned. Because we're different? Yes, Ethan said. But being different isn't a bad thing. It makes us stronger. Will they ever like us? Sarah asked softly. Ethan exchanged a glance with Angela. Some will. Some won't. But what matters is that we like ourselves and stand up for what's right. Chloe's voice was firm. Like I did at school today. Exactly, Angela said, her voice filled with pride. As the family conversation continued, the tension eased, replaced by a sense of unity. They were stronger together, and nothing could break that bond. The Festival Showdown. The annual Meadowville Harvest Festival was the town's biggest event, drawing crowds from neighboring communities. Despite the lingering hostility, Ethan and Angela decided to attend with the kids, determined to show they belonged. The festival grounds were bustling with activity, vendors selling handmade crafts, children running between game booths, and the mouth-watering scent of roasted corn filling the air. Angela spotted Mary waving from a food stall. Come on, she said, leading the family over. Glad you made it, Mary said warmly. The kids have been looking forward to seeing Chloe. As the children ran off to play, Ethan and Angela mingled with the crowd. Some people greeted them warmly, while others averted their gazes. Near the center of the grounds, a group of men stood together, their expressions hard. Among them was the same man who had confronted Ethan on their property. He stepped forward, his voice loud enough to draw attention. Well, look who decided to show up. Thought you'd be too scared after our little chat. Ethan squared his shoulders. We're not going anywhere. The man sneered. This town doesn't need you. Actually, it does, Sheriff Tate's voice cut through the tension as he approached. Dr. Carter saved lives at the community hall. He's earned his place here. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Mary spoke up. And Angela's been a blessing at the school. Our kids love her. One by one, voices joined in support until the man and his followers found themselves outnumbered. You might not like us, Angela said, her voice steady, but we're here to stay. And we'll keep doing good, whether you like it or not. The man scowled but said nothing as he walked away. Ethan took Angela's hand, his heart full of gratitude. The tide was turning, and love was winning over hate. As the festival continued, Ethan and Angela knew they had faced a pivotal moment. Their family had stood strong, and the community was beginning to see them for who they truly were. The road ahead would still have challenges, but they were ready for whatever came next, the price of change. As the days passed following the festival showdown, a shift swept through Meadowville. The Carter family was no longer merely tolerated by most of the townsfolk, they were embraced by many as integral members of the community. Ethan's clinic saw a steady flow of patients, and Angela found herself being asked to volunteer at local events. However, not everyone was ready to let go of their biases. Some individuals clung to their prejudices like a shield against the inevitable tide of change. It was late one afternoon when Ethan's phone buzzed with a call from Sheriff Tate. The urgency in Tate's voice was palpable. Doc, we've got a situation. The old Sanders place caught fire. There are people trapped inside. I'm on my way, Ethan said without hesitation, grabbing his medical bag. Angela, hearing the conversation, stopped him at the door. Be careful, she urged, her eyes filled with concern. I always am, he promised before dashing out the door. The flames of desperation. The Sanders place, an old farmhouse on the outskirts of town, was engulfed in flames by the time Ethan arrived. Smoke billowed into the sky, and the acrid scent of burning wood stung his nostrils. Sheriff Tate was directing volunteers to form a bucket brigade while firefighters battled the blaze. We've got 2 people still inside, Mr. Sanders and his grandson, Tate informed Ethan grimly. Ethan's heart raced. I'll go in, he said without hesitation. Tate grabbed his arm. It's too dangerous, document. If I don't, they might not make it, Ethan said firmly, pulling free. He covered his mouth with a damp cloth and plunged into the burning house. The heat was oppressive, and flames licked at the walls, threatening to consume everything in their path. Mr. Sanders. Jonah. Ethan shouted, his voice hoarse from the smoke. A faint cough guided him to the living room, where the elderly Mr. Sanders lay on the floor, unconscious. Jonah, a frightened boy of about 10, clung to his grandfather's hand. It's okay, Ethan said calmly. We're getting out of here. He hoisted Mr. Sanders onto his shoulder and took Jonah's hand. Stay close to me, he instructed. Navigating through the inferno was harrowing, but Ethan's determination never wavered. They emerged from the house just as part of the roof collapsed behind them. The crowd erupted in cheers as Ethan carried Mr. Sanders to safety. Jonah clung to his side, tears streaming down his soot-streaked face. Sheriff Tate clapped Ethan on the back. You're something else, document. Ethan shook his head. Just doing what needed to be done. The ripple of redemption. The next morning, Ethan visited Mr. Sanders at the hospital. The elderly man was awake, his eyes filled with gratitude. Doc, he rasped, I owe you my life. You don't owe me anything, Ethan said gently. Just take care of yourself. Mr. Sanders hesitated. I haven't been kind to you and your family. I judged you without knowing you. I'm sorry. Ethan's expression softened. Apology accepted. Let's move forward from here. As he left the room, Ethan felt a weight lift from his shoulders. Progress was being made, one heart at a time. A threat lurks in the shadows. Despite the growing acceptance, darkness still lingered. One evening, as Ethan and Angela sat on the porch watching the kids play, a truck roared down the street, its occupants shouting slurs and threats. Angela's hand tightened around Ethan's. They're not giving up, are they? No, Ethan said grimly. But neither are we. That night, Ethan and Angela had a serious conversation with Sheriff Tate, who promised to increase patrols near their home. We'll keep you safe, Tate assured them. But the Carters knew they couldn't rely solely on the sheriff. They needed the community's support. The town meeting. Angela suggested hosting a town meeting to address the growing tensions and find a way forward together. The idea gained traction, and soon the community hall was filled with residents, both supportive and skeptical. Ethan stood at the front, his heart pounding. Public speaking had never been his strength, but this was too important to shy away from. Thank you all for coming, he began. I know that change isn't easy, and some of you have concerns about my family being here. But we're not here to take anything away from this town. We're here to contribute, to make it better. Angela stepped forward, her voice steady. We believe in love, compassion, and community. And we believe that Meadowville is capable of being a place where everyone belongs. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Mary stood up. They're right. The Carters have done more for this town in a short time than some folks have in years. Sheriff Tate added, I've seen firsthand the good they're doing. We need to back them up, not tear them down. One by one, voices of support rose, drowning out the dissent. The town was choosing unity over division. A new beginning. As the meeting concluded, Ethan and Angela felt a renewed sense of hope. The road ahead wouldn't be without challenges, but they had faith in the resilience of their family and the goodness of people. That night, as they tucked the kids into bed, Chloe whispered, "Did we win, Mommy?" Angela smiled. "We're winning, sweetheart. And we'll keep winning as long as we stick together." Ethan wrapped his arms around Angela, his heart full. "We're going to be okay," he said softly. "We already are," Angela replied. Outside, the stars shone brightly over Meadowville, a testament to the light that could always overcome darkness. Triumph in unity. The weeks following the town meeting saw a remarkable transformation in Meadowville. The old barriers built by ignorance and prejudice began to crumble, replaced by a growing sense of unity. Ethan and Angela Carter had become symbols of strength and compassion, inspiring others to confront their own biases and embrace change. But while most of the town rallied around them, shadows still lingered on the fringes. The threats from a small but vocal group of dissenters had not entirely disappeared. The Carters knew that true peace required vigilance and courage. A call in the night. It was a quiet Sunday evening. Angela was in the kitchen preparing dinner while Ethan read on the porch. The children were sprawled across the living room floor, giggling over a board game. The tranquility was interrupted by the shrill ring of Ethan's phone. "Dr. Carter," he answered, his tone professional. "Doc, it's Sheriff Tate," came the voice on the other end. "We've got trouble at the church. Vandals set fire to part of it, and Reverend Jacobs is injured. We need you." "I'm on my way," Ethan said, grabbing his bag. Angela appeared at the door, concern etched on her face. "Another fire?" she asked. Ethan nodded grimly. "At the church. Reverend Jacobs is hurt." "I'm coming with you," Angela insisted. Facing the flames. The church was a beloved landmark, its white steeple visible from miles away. When Ethan and Angela arrived, smoke still wafted from the charred remains of one side of the building. Firefighters were dousing the last embers, and townsfolk gathered in stunned silence. Reverend Jacobs sat on the steps, his arm bandaged but his spirit unbroken. "Thank you for coming, Doc," he said, wincing as Ethan examined him. "You'll be okay," Ethan assured him. "But you need to rest." Angela looked around at the solemn faces of the townspeople. "We can't let this divide us," she said firmly. "This isn't just an attack on the church. It's an attack on our community." Mary stepped forward, her voice trembling with resolve. "She's right. We need to stand together." Sheriff Tate addressed the crowd. "We'll find whoever did this. But in the meantime, let's show them that they can't break us." The community rebuilds. The following morning, volunteers gathered at the church to begin repairs. Ethan and Angela joined in, hammering nails and painting walls alongside their neighbors. The work was hard, but the spirit of unity was undeniable. Even Mr. Sanders, who had once harbored deep prejudices, showed up with his grandson Jonah. "Thought I'd lend a hand," he said gruffly, avoiding eye contact. Ethan extended his hand. "Glad to have you." Mr. Sanders hesitated before shaking it. "You're a good man, document. I was wrong about you." "Thank you," Ethan said sincerely. As the day wore on, laughter and conversation filled the air. Children played nearby, their carefree joy a testament to the hope blossoming in Meadowville. A reckoning. That evening, Sheriff Tate arrived at the Carter home with news. "We caught the vandals," he said. "They're being charged with arson and hate crimes." Ethan nodded, relief washing over him. "Justice is important, but so is healing," he said thoughtfully. Tate's expression softened. "You've helped this town start healing, document, don't ever forget that. A celebration of unity. A week later, the town held a celebration at the newly restored church. Banners reading Meadowville United hung proudly, and tables overflowed with food brought by residents. Reverend Jacobs stood before the crowd, his voice strong despite his recent injuries. Tonight, we celebrate not just the rebuilding of this church, but the rebuilding of our hearts and minds. The Carters came to this town as strangers, but they've become family. Let's honor them by continuing to stand together. Applause erupted, and tears welled in Angela's eyes. Ethan squeezed her hand, his heart full. As music filled the air, townsfolk danced and laughed. Mary pulled Angela onto the makeshift dance floor, while Ethan found himself surrounded by grateful patients who shared stories of how he had helped them. Even Mr. Sanders joined the festivities, laughing as Jonah challenged Sarah to a race. A legacy of love. As the celebration wound down, Ethan and Angela stood on the church steps, watching their children chase fireflies under the starlit sky. "We did it," Angela whispered, leaning against Ethan. "We all did it," he corrected. "Together." Angela smiled. "Think Meadowville's ready for us now?" "They better be," Ethan said with a chuckle. Their journey had been filled with challenges, but love, courage, and resilience had prevailed. The Carters had not only found a home in Meadowville, they had helped shape it into a place where acceptance and unity thrived. And as they looked out over the community that had once doubted them, they knew that their story was far from over. They had built something beautiful, and it would endure for generations to come.